Before we can really dive into the examples, we need to learn how to work our tools. For most of you, the Eclipse environment will be new and will not ultimately be the tool you'll use to develop in C and C++. Even for those of you who are familiar with Eclipse, and even those of you who are going to be using it to develop in C and C++, our development cycle for these exercises will probably be different anyway. So let's take a few minutes now, learn how this works for the purpose of following along with the exercises in this course, and the time spent now will serve you well later on. So let's start by making a working copy of a file. We're going to select hello.c. That's the traditional way to do this. We use a hello world example. It's very simple. We know there's not much that can go wrong with it, and we can really focus on the development environment. And I'm going to copy and paste. You can right-click or control-click on a Mac, and you can select copy and paste here from the context menu. Or what I'm going to do is I'm going to get used to using my keyboard. I'm on a Mac here, so I'm going to press Command-C. You'd press Control-C if you're on a PC. And that will copy this. It puts in the copy buffer. And then you select the working folder down here. It's a separate project, actually, the working project. And you press Control-V on a PC, or I'm going to press Command-V on this Mac to paste it. It's good to get into the habit of doing it that way. If you want to drag it and hold a special key, you can do that. You just need to be careful that you're not making a link back to the original file or moving the original file. And it's just a whole lot easier to copy and paste. So I'm going to double click on hello.c. And there it is, very simple. Comment at the top, include standard I/O. We'll learn all about these different parts of the C program later on. What we have here is just a really simple example of a very minimal C program that we can use for this purpose. So at this point, there's different options. We can do build, we can do run. For most purposes, pressing the run key here would work fine. And yet on some platforms, and if you're running on a PC, make sure you take a look at the movie Working with Eclipse on Windows to understand the problem that sometimes happens on Windows computers. That may not actually work. You might need to do a clean first. So we're going to start with doing a clean. We're going to come up here to the project menu. Unfortunately, there's no shortcut key. There's no icon on the toolbar for this. You just have to go up to the project menu and select clean. And what this does is it cleans all the files that may have been lingering from anything that we ran before. So I'm going to select Clean All Projects and press OK. And that makes sure that our project down here is in a clean state and ready to compile. And once that's happened, if I press this Run button, it's the big green one, it will actually compile and run this project without a problem. The other option is to press Build first, and Build will always build the entire project. And then Run will run it. And there we have it running again. And it's just good to play around with this, try some different combinations of it, erase the Hello C, copy it back, maybe try some of the other files from that Chapter 2 folder and run them, and get a good idea for the environment here and what can go wrong and what works. Taking the time to do that at this point is always a good idea. Let's take a moment here and also try the CPP version, the hello.cpp. So I'm going to delete hello.c because remember, you cannot have two different source files with main in them in the same project. So I'm just going to press delete here, select hello.c and delete and press OK. And that deletes it. I'm also going to come back up here and press clean. Try and get into the habit of doing this every time you delete a file. Clean all projects. And then we're going to come back and select hello.cpp. This is the C++ version of it. And Command-C copy or Control-C on a PC. And Command-V paste or Control-V on a PC. I'm going to double click on it. That brings it up here. You see it's slightly different. It's pretty much the same program, but with some C++ idioms in it. And it's in the C++ file. And I'm just going to press that run because we already did a clean when we deleted the other file. So run should work fine. And that compiles it and it runs it. So you'll notice in the debug folder here, got a couple of files in there. There's the hello.o, that's the object file. And in binaries, we have working, that's the executable file. And look around in those directories and see what you find. Get familiar with this environment. It's also useful to understand what happens when we introduce some errors into our code. If I misspell cout, just put an X there. And save it. I'm pressing Command-S on my keyboard, Control-S if you're on a PC, and try and compile and run it. You see that we get errors, and we have an error up here. If I hover over it, it says cout was not declared in this scope. Symbol cout could not be resolved. Get an idea of what some of these error messages look like. Go ahead and delete that and save it and run again. And now it works fine. Let's get rid of this semicolon and see what happens when we get rid of this semicolon. And I'll save. And sometimes when you press that run, it goes and does a whole build instead. And this is just something that Eclipse does. Press OK. I can always say run in background if I want to. And so it's good to understand that that's something you'll see now and then. If I hover over this error, you see it says expected semicolon before return. And if I hover over this question mark, it says missing semicolon. You'll notice that the compiler message, if we look down here at the compiler message, it doesn't have the missing semicolon message. That's actually from Eclipse's syntax checker. So that's done by Eclipse and not by the compiler. That's why it's this yellow question mark icon instead of one of the red icons that you get from the compiler errors. So I'll go ahead and I'll put that semicolon back and I'll save and I'll build. I'm going to just say run in background. And there it builds the file and runs it. So play around a little bit, make some mistakes. This is the time to get to know the tools. And let's just go ahead and delete hello.cpp. And I'm going to run clean. Want to do this at the end of every one of these movies so that you're always in this clean state at the beginning as you start the next lesson. This should give you a good idea of how you'll be using the Eclipse environment to run the examples in this course. Because every environment is different and really every project is different. You'll want to go carefully through this process at the beginning of every project that you do so you can focus on the problem at hand later on rather than worrying about your development environment.